And then there was us, the brave and the bold, the last men and women standing. Well, we're the closing session. Hopefully we'll be as entertaining as if Zach were to give me a basketball and I would test his security deposit. But we had a lot of cool sessions so far. AI has come up over and over and over again, and we're not at the point yet where in any of your leadership rooms, boardrooms, whatever, it's just gonna be a bunch of computers talking to each other, right? So really what we're gonna focus on here in this last session is what is still, and hopefully for a long time, irreplaceable, and that's human capital, right? So when it comes to franchise brands, even supplier brands, I would say that talent, whether it's at the leadership level, steering the brand, or those representing it, it's just absolutely critical. That's gonna ultimately show how strong the brand is and where you're gonna go with that. So I'm Joshua Schure. I'm the VP of Strategy for Transitiv. Those of you that aren't familiar with Transitiv, we are a business intelligence company that helps wrangle your data, make sense of that data, and visualize it to your franchisees and give them a business health score against your KPIs so that they can see where they rank in the network and make an informed decision to increase their score, kind of like a Credit Karma. And I will pass along to Neil, who perhaps this conference is named after, to introduce himself, and we'll come down the line this way.
Test. Yeah, ours is working.
So my name is Neil Young. I am the president of Two Ladders Consulting. In the simplest form, we help companies source applicants for direct hire, and hopefully I'll get some opportunities to tell you a little bit more about what we do.
I'm Andy Fuller with Mosquito Hunters, founder and CEO. Started here in Chicago in 2014. Started franchising in 2016. So we've got 85 franchisees, 130 locations.
John Erlandson, co-founder of Youth Athletes United. We're one of the largest kids sports platforms specializing in first sport experience. So soccer, multi-sport preschool programs, and tennis and golf.
Hey guys, Brigham here. I met most of you guys already. Hello Sugar, Brazilian waxing and sugaring salon.
I got this one.
Oh yeah, you don't need this.
You keep that. You're
All right, thank you.
So, a lot of diverse backgrounds in terms of where people are in their brand stage, whether franchise, whether suppliers. But if we're going to look at it in stages, right? And we're talking about infancy. I'm a sports freak, so I'll give the fantasy football draft analogy. You know, some people, when they're first starting out, they have a strategy. I need to get 2 running backs, or start with a receiver, or I'm going to go with a quarterback, or best available. So Andy, I'll start with you. At the absolute beginning, how did you go about filling your team? Who were those initial seats that you wanted to fill and that you were able to successfully do so with?
I think the backbone of a franchisor is the coaches, or the RBCs, or FBCs, whatever you want to call them, the people who are working directly one-on-one with the franchisees. And I think your brand is going to, in large part, succeed or plateau or fail based on how well you're aligned with your coaches. And you can't be perfect, obviously, in business, but I think you cannot be accepting anything less than A players when it comes to your coaches. So you need to take all of the time to make sure that you hire an A player, like unequivocally. You can't afford B+, and if you realize that someone is a B+ or less, then I think you have no choice but to make a change.
I'll expand on the coaching thing a little bit. What we found is the biggest challenge we had is if you hire somebody who's a coach, who's never owned a business, who's never been a franchisee, they can only kind of do the playbook, right? They can go in and give you the best practices. So we were fortunate enough that we consolidated these brands. A lot of them had 15, 20-year histories. So we had a lot of retired owners that really were there and had nothing to do and liked us, liked what we were doing, said, I want to get involved. All of our coaches today are former owners, which has been an unreal advantage. I mean, you put a former owner out there, there's nothing they can say to a former owner that they haven't lived through. And if your owners want to come back and work with you, it's a real compliment to what you're doing as a franchisor. Like, wow, I still want to be part of this system. If your owners are retiring and running away, it probably says something about what you're doing as a franchisor. And so for us, that's kind of our staple is we put a real person who was a business owner in the market with you, and it's actually been more cost effective too.
All right, and then when we get past that stage where the team is built out, you have initial franchisees, you're in that emerging stage, what are the next positions that you're looking to fill? And gentlemen, you could speak too about being on the supplier side. I know for us, like once we had our initial leadership team built out, what we wanted to do was bring in an integrator / COO. So bring them on you.
Yeah, we'll call these bands, right? So like there are different levels to a company, and you have bands in these levels. In the first band, in my experience, I wouldn't hire coaches. Every business is different, right? But I think that's the role of the CEO. I mean, you've got 5 to 10, 15 franchisees. You can handle mentoring at that level. It's not necessary for a coach. I think what's more important is the ops guy. What happened in our company is when we started in 2021 franchising, we had a really good company, but we had no systems built out for franchisees. That was a huge difference. And so we came in and we just built the ops core, like how do we standardize this, SOWs, et cetera. That was band 1. And now band 2 is, for me, I look at this and I say, okay, instead of a coach, how do I set something up so I never have to say the same thing twice? And it's courses. For us, it's courses. So we have everything built out on a Thinkific platform. That's a coaching platform. And there's videos on there and everything. And then we do a weekly Loom. And on the Loom video, I share all the experiences I had through the week of all the coaching sessions I had one-on-one with people. I just broadcast that. It's like a podcast for my company, a weekly meeting where I send that out to everybody else. And in that sense, like people are still learning. We're at probably 20, 25 franchisees, and we still don't use coaches yet.
I think for us, we have kind of a unique situation. The OpCo, or the units we own and run, is actually about 40% of the total franchise system. So it's very large. Actually, I'm sorry, I had that backwards. It's actually 60% of the total franchise system. So we're bigger than all the franchisees combined. So we've had a really unique situation of, starting to convert off the OpCos. We're just too big, right? Because there's only so much time in a day. And then what we have found is the OpCo is funding an excessive amount of resources for the Franco, but the Franco is growing like exponentially, so we're happy to do it. And so one thing I would give advice for anybody that has a small business, if you can't don't get rid of your OpCo too fast if it's cash flowing. If you really want to build long-term value in your system, take that free cash flow and those people and those resources that are living the business and get them involved with the franchisees. Because again, you have real people that they're talking to, not someone who's sitting up here in their perch that hasn't lived their problems. It's worked very well for us. It's been expensive. Like we have great paper profits and no cash flow profits, but that's because we're reinvesting all the cash back into the business constantly to get this growth. And we have pretty happy franchisees because of it. And a lot of that's personnel.
From a strategy and execution standpoint of being able to attract and get that talent, what tricks have you used, incentives, programs? I mean, it's not as easy as saying, we'll take him, we'll take her.
I mean, I could talk from the state of what we do. So in talking to several people here, I was talking to Brittany specifically just a while ago, if setting and from the crowd, listening to everybody talk about processes and KPIs that all report back to revenue. There was never anybody talking about KPIs and processes that report ROI for recruitment. And so, we've been really digging in on still utilizing all of the things that people are using. Facebook, Indeed, job boards, whatever. But how do you track the ROI if the reporting starts at your website or at an ATS? So long term, the goal would be you make a hire, that person's retained, let's say 6 months. You can put whatever KPI you want on it. What source drove that individual to stay? And then once you start to understand those sources, you can start to refine your overall cost in your recruitment. And from down to the franchisee, it makes it really simple for them to copy, paste, repeat, right? Because one location has an issue, the same location or another location is going to have that same problem. And once you figure out what campaigns and strategies work, it's really easy to replicate.
Dominate the stage. You're right. Sure. So when you're small and you need to recruit talent, you're never going to have enough money to pay people. So my advice is be really good at selling your vision and be hyper creative in the deals you make. You know what? You may have to put these somebody who's really talented that you want to bring on board. You might have to bring them in as a consultant, for 20 hours a week. Well, they run a side business, and you're trying to recruit them, but you got to sell them on a vision of where they're going. Listen, you give me a great rate. You run in your little LLC that you've been doing. You can still keep your other clients for the next 6 months. If the company gets to here, I'll hire you in this position, and I'll pay you this. And then I'll ultimately get you to where you want to be, and I'll give you some stock options, but you got to achieve these things. If somebody is not willing to work at that level of creativity, either they don't believe in your vision enough, they don't want to be there enough, or they're probably not the right type of person that has an entrepreneurial mindset to come in the door in the first place. And that is how we've recruited all of our talent at pretty much every entrepreneurial, high growth company I've ever been at in my life.
I think it's really uncreative of us to assume that our employees are working for us just for money. Obviously, that's why someone gets a job and everybody has bills that they need to pay. But really what I've found is that the best employees, they want a sense of purpose. They want a lot of autonomy. They want to be able to make decisions. They want to build things. This is exactly kind of what you're talking about. And if you can articulate what your vision is and where you're trying to go, in my experience, I've been kind of amazed by how flexible a really good employee is going to be with you if you're not able to meet them exactly where they want to be in terms of compensation. So to your point, I agree. Also, keep your costs variable to the greatest extent that you can. Early on, what I would say is something similar to my early employees is your base is going to be like stupid low. Like it's going to be really like embarrassingly low, but your bonus is going to be gigantic. Like here's your potential if we achieve these goals together. And for some people, that's not going to make sense. But for the right employee who's coming into the business at that time, like it can actually be a perfect alignment. And though they're not technically legally an owner, they have extreme ownership of what their role is because they want to be a part of that journey with you.
Yeah, I'm going to add on a couple of things. I think there's a lot of wisdom in the 20-hour rule. When we start off with hiring a new person, we're going to bring them in for one task, and it's going to be a contract position. And that contract position, if they do it well, we'll give them a bigger task, and it'll eventually turn into a part-time role. And from the part-time role, it'll move into a full-time role. We want to really vet people before bringing them into our system. The second thing that we do is we've looked at private equity groups and said, hey, how do they run and structure businesses? They're going to give a profit-sharing equity percentage to the group of people that come into the company. And so what we've structured is a percentage of our company will be set up similarly. So take it, an average is 8 to 15%. So let's take 10% as like the amount. That becomes something called phantom stock. Phantom stock is not like real stock. You don't share in the equity gains. It's not something that's passed on every time, but it's used at the time of a buyout from a private equity group as a trade-up bonus. And it's in an option format. So the way that works is, let's say John comes on with Hello Sugar, and in year one, he vests, 25% of his total amount. It's an option, right? And so, he will option at 25%. 2 years from now, that 25% would vest, meaning that he'd have to stay another 2 years to receive that money. But that money, when you look at what it's worth, might be $200,000, $300,000. And so then when he's looking at other places to go, because he's a key talent person, if he's saying, hey, that place is paying me $150, I'm making $100 now, well, now they've got to match that $200,000 to $300,000 that the bonus would happen at the trade up to make that jump worth it. And that's how you can keep and retain talent over long periods of time.
We do the exact same thing. I think the companies that I've been at, and I've been very fortunate to be at some hyper growth companies, some of it just through dumb luck, some of it through being good. But the ones that I saw go from 0 to 13 billion, that was the biggest I was ever at. It was a Harvard case study. If you look up the company called Authentic Brands, they just bought Reebok, a couple months ago. When I started there, it was 6 employees, and literally I was in a closet. I was a big executive coming from a big company, And I'm like, where's my office? They're like, it's that closet. I'm like, all right, I guess I can try this. And then they shoved 3 more people in the next week in my closet, and it was tight in there. But how they got me to stay was I had a huge options package at a penny a piece. And again, the founders sold me on the vision, sold me on the mission, and I did very, very well. It's what allowed me to invest in this company today and kind of chase my dream of being an entrepreneur, and I learned a lot. And so we have that same exact package in place. The one thing I will say is you have to be careful about setting the expectation of what those things are going to be worth, right? So you can't sell somebody on the dream that they're all going to be millionaires and this is the next tech startup, because 99% of the time that's not going to happen. So we explain, look, this is going to be a really nice check at the end of the rainbow. And if we crush it, it can be a lottery ticket, but I'm not selling you, don't come here for a lottery ticket. Come here because you believe in the vision. You want to wake up every day helping kids, knowing that what we do makes the world a better place, and you're going to make some really good money along the way. And making a lot of money in our business is a byproduct of just doing great things for kids. Like, money's just a wonderful byproduct. Think of it that way. And if those people like hit that sweet spot, they fit in great and they stay for a long time.
You all jumped the gun on the retention topic, but but sticking with that, one thing that we do as a company, maybe twice a year, once a year, is a seats exercise. Because at the end of the day, you gentlemen said it, not everything is motivated by money, right? People want to grow in their careers. They want to do what they love. They don't want to go to work. They don't want to be miserable every day. So I don't know if everyone's familiar with the seats exercise, but what we do is we basically get hundreds of Post-its out, and we have the different segments of the company, from marketing to sales and everything. And it's what do you want to do? What do you think you're good at? And then everyone gets up and they kind of justify that. And we might learn that somebody who's in position A could actually be thriving in position B and be happier in that position and keep that A player, keep that A talent. So if you have any success stories on things like that help you retain that A talent, it would be great if you could share.
So I have a specific example in mind. There's a guy who is one of our best coaches that we have. He's worked for Mosquito Hunters since he was 19 years old. This was his summer job, being a technician in 2014. He came to work for me. He was the second employee I ever hired who wasn't someone who I went to high school with. And he was supposed to work for us for like 2 months, and we just gelled really early on. He bought into the vision, and at least an annual basis, we don't do it like clockwork, but at least an annual basis, I sit down with him, because we have a really good rapport, and just say, what do you want to be doing? And that first conversation happened in 2014, years before we even had a franchise, before I even really knew what an FDD was or anything like that. But I knew I wanted to franchise, because I just knew I wanted to build something. And he was on board with that. And he said, well, I'd like to get some experience being a manager. Then he became an operations manager. He took over a lot of the responsibilities here in Chicago. Then he became the general manager in Chicago. Then we started getting franchisees. And then I realized, oh my God, we really need some coaches. I had some coaches who weren't the right people in the right seats. And so I had to let them go. Had to fill in quickly with the right person to start. I went to this guy. He's worn every hat in running the operation here in Chicago. Our conversation that we had earlier in that year, this was like 5 years ago now, he says, I would love to be like a business consultant or something someday. So I thought, okay, maybe this would be a good fit. This guy knows everything about running a Mosquito Hunters business. He likes coaching people. He's what a coach should be, So that would be an example, I think, of a success story.
I think as the CEO or as the founder and the leader of the company, you have to make amazing things happen every day. And that makes people want to stay. People want to be around amazing, right? Our people come to us, I can't get through to this customer. Find a way, right? For a good example is take a really, really outside the box meeting. Maybe you go meet with another owner that somebody else is very impressed with. Come to lunch, join me. And maybe you do half the meeting first without that person. You give them the opportunity to meet at the bar for a drink and meet another business owner in the community. You let them into a little window when you come out of a board meeting. Hey, here's what just happened at our board meeting. right? Because a lot of owners, especially small companies, they're so afraid of sharing information. And I will tell you, the best companies that I worked for less, worked harder, it was because I was learning every day. Something amazing was happening every day. The business was growing. We were getting a new customer. I was seeing a side of the world I didn't see. You know, if we were having a problem with the private equity firm, the CEO would pull me in and be like, look, this is the problem we're running through right now. You know, they don't want to refinance the debt. They don't want to do this. And as a 26-year-old kid, I mean, that was unbelievable to be exposed to that. And so every high-performance organization I've ever seen, the leadership team is sharing information constantly down. And if you do too much of it, you learn there's a level where people can't process it, right? So there's a balancing act there, but make something amazing constantly happen and people stay with you a long time, especially talented ones.
So when I started Two Ladders, there were 4 of us. Current state, we're at 16. And the vast majority of our company growth came from a merger based upon some technology that we needed to expand what we were doing. And so the clashing of cultures was interesting, right? And putting people in the right seats for the right jobs. We, after about a year of additional growth, we kind of hit a pause and went through, processed out all of our own processes. The majority of the standard work was written by myself. And what I wanted to do was have everybody have the opportunity to look at standard work for what it was. And then future state, what was their input on what standard work could be. And so, you know, we're at 16. We did that planning for knowing that by the end of the year, we're probably going to be at 30. So the nice thing about it was everybody came in with, here's a part of the process that I hate. It's clunky. What if we did it this way? And so now we've got a fully vested group of 16 people that in their current state are an employee, but in future state are all management and leadership.
Just so that we're appealing to everybody out there, I know that we had a few franchisees attending the conference. I don't know if they're still in the audience, but whether it's something you've seen brands do or something that you've done at brands, obviously employment and staffing at the location level is critical, right? I mean, employees drive revenue, and that revenue is getting kicked up to you guys with your royalties, right? So if you could share, you know, what and how you help your locations with acquiring and retaining talent, because as we know, some locations go out of business because they don't have the staffing to run the business.
Yeah, this is an awesome question. I think even your best efforts, you're going to get it really right one time. You're going to be middle of the pack for your second, and then you're going to hire somebody that's kind of not a good fit for you. Like people, just like relationships, right? Like you see one thing in the beginning, and then the crazy starts coming out, right? Like a little later.
This man, he knows me well.
So we go through a 4-process like interviewing. The first process is we do a personality test. And we ran through all of our employees, say over 100, and we looked at the performance of sales based on personalities. And we started clustering them, and we ran what's called a regression analysis, which is a correlation of the personality to the performance. And what we found was, and we used something called predictive index. It's a paid test. For us, our size is about $14,000 a year. For smaller companies, it might be $3,000 to $5,000 a year. It's worth every penny, because if we can eliminate some of those bads, then that, you know, there's less cost on training, right? So what happens is they do the personality test, and it turns out for sales, the analyzers, the specialists, the scholars are not very good because they're too reserved. And the people that are most bubbly and outgoing, which the normal personalities are persuaders, promoters, those are really good. Our best personality type is something called an altruist. It's the person that becomes your best friend and you feel very comfortable with them. And that makes a lot of sense if you're naked in a butterfly position on a table, right? Like, you know, that's probably a good thing to be, like, comfortable with that person. So they sell better. So first we do the personality test. We rate them on the personalities. Then we do a values test. And we use, I'll share a quick story. In early on interviewing, a lot of people liked a girl. One person didn't. We asked, why didn't you like him? She said, I didn't like her nails. And I'm like, gosh, like, you're just missing the boat. Like, just, who cares, right? But for her, that was a high priority. So we standardized the priorities and the values of the company, and we rate them on a scale, and then we look and see if the point values are high enough. It's a standard process.
I'll ask you a question on that because I'm curious. We've talked about doing it also for franchisees, which is a whole different topic. Did you really see a measurable enough result that you're like was it 2% better or was it like 20% better? Like, just, I can't believe we weren't doing this before.
On the personality test? Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I'll give you some examples. So the artisan, the bad personality, 1 in 7 of the ones employed for us was a good fit. On the altruist side, 6 of 7 were the top scorers in the company. And so, yeah, if I hire an artisan, 1 in 7 might be a good fit, right? 14.5%. But I've got, 86.5% that are just, or 85.5% that are not good, right? Just out the gate. So I don't even interview them anymore. So that saves us a lot of time on the interview process. I'm looking for the altruists and those other kinds. So yeah, I'm going to miss some good candidates, but at the same time, I'm going to hire a lot more successfully the good ones. And if it's $14,000 a year for me, but my training cost is $2,000 a person, that's only 7 people I have to get right, and I have over 100 people that I'm hiring a year. So the math works on that. Okay, yeah, thanks. That's a good question on that. So the second thing we do is the person or the composition and the profile score. And then what I do is I created a course. So in my company, I want to get rid of people. I actually don't want to have a lot of staff. So I'm probably not a good person to ask. We run a fairly large company with 5 people, and the rest are overseas. And so we just look at how do we automate as much of this as possible. So we actually build a course on selling our membership. It's an hour-long course. They go home after the first interview, they watch the course, and then we role play as us, a client, and they're the person selling us. So we can see if they actually did the effort to get the job, and then if they actually are a good fit. After that, they come to training, and in training, we're going to let one of the 3 go. That's our process. It's 4 parts, and it usually works pretty well.
From the process standpoint, 4 out of 5 individuals will look at an application process, and that becomes the perception of what it would be like to work there. So if it's clunky, if it's difficult, if you're asking 800 questions for an entry-level position, the moment that individual bails out, 50% of those people will not come back in and actually even utilize your services because they're mad. So it becomes apparent especially for these brands that were here this week, to make sure that that front-end process is as simple as possible. Don't make individuals go through all the steps. 75% of the workforce will be millennials by 2025, and Gen Zs and Alphas are all digital natives, so they're only gonna know one process. And if your process doesn't fit, it's my dad's process, they're gone. So
do you find though, so we've had a big debate on this with coaches because we hire 600 coaches a year, right? If I'm too lazy to go through a bunch of steps, generally you get the other result of it was too easy, you didn't have to do anything. So the people that are coming in, so we swung the pendulum so far to easy that we realized we were only getting people that were lazy, we weren't filtering out, So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there's a stat that says 70% of the workforce globally is passive or inactive. So if you're not actively branding yourself and the culture and what goes with it, those individuals are, you think about your own routines. You drive to work every day, you're not thinking about where I could work tomorrow. You're thinking about what you got to do in the next 20 minutes. And so if you're inviting individuals that are passively applying, and then you make them go through a dictionary of questions, you're missing out on possible good, talented people because they just want to talk to you. And so we've inserted a lot of stopgaps with a lot of clients. And massive clients that's literally changed the percentage of applicant success. Individuals always come and they're like, what else can I be spending money on? What else can I do? And when at the end of the day, it boils down to fix your process and make it super streamlined. And from that, I think what happens is HR managers, and I don't think there's any in the room, but they get lazy Like, it's crazy to me how many people say, I have to hire 100 people to meet headcount. And I'm like, okay, well, what are you doing? And they're like, well, I'm going just through all these applications, and I'm then categorizing the applications based upon who I want to talk to first. Well, you're putting all of the work on the applicant. And so what we've asked our clients to do is make it super simple, landing page even, basic information to qualify them to bring them in for an interview. Interview them. If you like them and you find that they're going to be a potential hire, then throw all the paperwork on them. So do more work up front on the company side to make it easier for the person to actually come to work for you. And it works.
So I would just say, you're exactly right, Josh. I mean, people go out of business because they don't hire appropriately. So for us, the tools that we use the most for mosquito hunters, again, we're looking for the technicians, the guys who come out wearing the backpack, unskilled labor, no mosquito control experience before, and it's a highly seasonal job. So it's tough. But the tools that we use that help us the most are Career Plug and Transitiv. Transitiv actually works really well. It's Josh's company. So we're getting in front of candidates who aren't even looking for jobs, tools that Transitiv offers, which is really beneficial. And I agree with what you guys are saying here. I mean, it's so much about just the engagement. They just want to talk to a real person. And if that needs to be a very quick process where between when they apply and when you can actually talk with them. After that, once you're having a conversation, be diligent and make sure you qualify that person and hire slow and all that. But you got to get on the phone and talk to a real person.
I mean, that's incredibly ironic considering most millennials don't want to talk to you. They want to text, right? We actually started using a lot more text messaging to reach out. We found that's gotten people in really quick. And then the other thing, I think as a franchisor, especially if you're anybody here who has an early stage franchise company, most franchisees need two things. They need help with recruiting and they need help with driving revenue, whatever that means, whether that's driving leads or it's literally how do I go out and get accounts in our case if I've got to knock on a school door. And so once we felt like we've streamlined the operations, if I spend another 30% of my time in operations, we're going to get 2% better. But you can infinitely expand the customer base and you can infinitely expand the rate at which you can process applications. So now that we feel like we've brought all these brands together on the platform, we've stabilized the software, checked all the boxes, our laser focus for the next 24 months is how do we have an accelerated recruitment machine for all the franchisees and how do we have an accelerated sales machine? And so we're trying a bunch of things, but I think as any franchisor, you figure those two things out, as long as you're recruiting good franchisees, the rest will just work itself out because good people make things happen.
So John, you used the word vent, and when I hear that, I feel like we should move to open things up for questions and let people. I mean, anyone who probably stayed around to the end wants your expertise on things. But I'll say this: I know everyone consumed a lot today, so if we could just give everyone one takeaway from this, I'll go first. From what I've heard and from what I've seen, hire like you sell.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't said this one yet, but this is a big mistake I made early on, was that we would teach the franchisees to do like HR, like recruit, but we wouldn't be involved in the process. So now at this step, we have kind of echoing this, like have somebody every step of the way in the initial hiring, because if you don't get that right, your company is going to fail off the bat. Like it's not going to work. So having a priority on this is huge.
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway, and you hear kind of the same thing, whether people that have built their businesses from scratch or consolidating them, is just that laser focus on talent and people. Because at the end of the day, people are your product in many of the businesses. Like I think it seems so obvious, but we lose it because we're caught up in the numbers and the spreadsheets and I got a problem with this franchisee or this franchisee loves us and wants to try something new. And but as you're spending all your time on all this other stuff, it gets very easy to just take everybody around you for granted. And so you constantly have to be reminding your team, they're reminding the franchisees, the people are the product, right? And as long as you spend a little bit of time on that every day and it doesn't get lost in the messaging, you're going to do pretty well.
I'd say, if nothing else, I would just want to impart the importance of coaches. Just like real coaches in sports, if you want to use that analogy, like no team has ever won the Super Bowl with bad coaching. No franchisor or franchise system has ever succeeded with bad coaches. So if nothing else, make sure you get A players for your coaches and be really tough on your assessment and be as quantitative as you can be in addition to qualitative in how you assess them. If somebody is truly not an A, if they're a B, my advice is to say that a B player isn't good enough. It's very, very, it's the most important thing, even more important than bringing on the perfect franchisees. You're going to bring on imperfect franchisees that aren't the perfect fit. It's just going to happen. You can overcome so much of that if you have A player coaches.
So I believe so much in the coaches, and you know what's crazy is the difference between an A and a B, and I never realized this. An A goes into the market, shows the person how to do it for about 25 minutes, 30 minutes, 2 hours, whatever it is, and then they step back and they make that owner go do whatever it is they need to do, and they sit through the cringy moments of like, oh, I could do this better. So for us, that's like door-to-door selling, right? Because I'm going to the schools. Or it's sitting through hiring and training your first time. And so what we found is our best coaches, we get really what I thought was an A coach, go in, and when they were there, for that week, things were running amazing. And then the minute they were gone, everything would fall apart. And so I realized what an A coach is usually the week they're there is painful. Like it's painful because you are pushing that person outside their comfort zone and then giving them real coaching advice. But the week after they left, things started getting really, really good. And so I think that's how we define A. But I agree, out of everything you can do, for us, that's number one.
My takeaway would be try to come up with the most frictionless process you can from the applicant side. At the same time, if you're looking at the KPIs that are resulting in bottom line revenue, you should be treating the hiring process with those same KPIs and that same look of from the same lens to make sure you're getting a good quality ROI.
Great. And with that, the floor is open. Questions?
I like this one. What is the most common misperception people seem to have about you? No one's ever prepared for that one, and you can't really lie with it. Because it's like, oh, what's your greatest strength? I work really hard. What's your greatest weakness? I just work too hard. What I like is what is the greatest misconception or misperception people seem to have about you?
So two things that have been big for us. One is, again, communicating by text message when you're bringing young millennials in. But the other one that we didn't talk about, so right now, I don't know what time of day it is, there's probably 1,000 classes running across the country. You tell me how they're going, right? So that's in my business right now. And by the way, in Chicago, we're all over the city. We're in preschools right across the street. I used to have an office right over here. I have no idea. If that coach showed up for the aftercare class at 1:30 at this preschool, at this Goddard school up the street, I couldn't tell you. So we've developed an app that's kind of like an Uber, where we can see all the coaches when they check in, if they've checked out, whether kids are on the roster. So now I have visibility. It's in pilot right now. It's actually launching this week. To all the franchisees. But not only does it allow me to do that, it also links into a staffing calendar, because you can imagine the complexities of staffing all that. And the idea is that's phase one to a point of where we can get the algorithms to start doing automated staffing. Because if you think about, our big saying is more green time, less screen time for our franchisees, for our kids, for our parents, for everybody, right? So a big portion of my job is logistics management of moving all these coaches around. So Coach Z calls out, I need to replace Coach Z, and the only coaches I have, let's say I have 30, 40 coaches in my region, only 3 of them can coach Parent and Me classes, right? So now I got to go through my spreadsheet. So why can't an algorithm just text the 3 coaches, does anyone want to pick up these hours at a surge rate today? I'll pay you an extra $5 if you come out and cover for this coach that just called out. That's where we have to get to. in terms of just logistically managing these mobile workforces. And we're spending over $1.2 million in free cash flow every year on technology, and it's brutal, but you got to do it. I don't know how else we're going to stay ahead, and also the other piece is, if I'm thinking 5 years out, why are our coaches not getting paid every 24 hours? Just like Uber drivers. Why would they not get their money every 24 hours? Like, think of that differentiator. You come to work for me, you're making $500 a week, right? You need your beer money for the weekend. Now you got to wait 2 weeks, right? So you're broke by the time the next check comes in. So like, I can see through all of this technology a huge competitive advantage of just meeting that employee and what their, all their friends are dealing with when they go drive Uber, and they're like, hey, I made $500 in the last 2 days.
So we've ran over 5,000 campaigns. We've generated well over 150,000 applications. We've spent close to $7 million to do that up to this point. And what we found is that HR managers will just dump the unqualified or individuals that maybe were going to be hired, but they didn't show up to work the first day. We start asking questions about why. Like, what can we have all of the applications that are either unqualified or you got rid of them for whatever reason? And so our team will go through and analyze it, all of it, like to understand the negative in those applications, because the easiest road to successful hires is through the negative applications. And so when you understand what a good hire looks like, a retained individual versus that unqualified, it allows you to adapt your overall campaigns and messages based upon whatever you learn in those applications. And so that's really what our platform was built to do, and let individuals see it. What sources drove the applications, what applications went through to hires, and then what hires have been retained for whatever date you want to set it to. And so over the course of time, your investments in recruiting should go down, because if you're running campaigns in 20 locations, you have shared data across those 20 locations. It's really easy to look at a location and say, why isn't that one performing as well as the others? And normally it's not a hiring problem, it's an operations problem. It's a manager. It's something inside that company or that business that's causing that breakdown. And so there's a lot of additional points you can take away from AppFlow to help you make some really nice decisions on what's happening inside the company as well.
What I would say, and I know you're just getting into franchising, what would be great as a franchisor to see, because we tried a recruiting experiment, and they'd come in, they'd interview with our corporate staff, who's pretty professional because we're a big company, and then we'd send them to the franchisee, and then the fall off rate would be just like, wait, I thought I was applying for this, and then I met your dude in a coffee shop and like wasn't really impressed with like, his 3-person operation. And so I think if we could have visibility to like that type of data.
Yeah. So when I started looking at just franchises, right? The interesting takeaway, and I've looked at pretty much everybody's process in this room up to this point, is you go to one centralized brand page and then you pick from 200 locations that you want to apply for. The question that I ask with every first meeting, discovery call, is what happens from the franchisor standpoint to the franchisee level when someone applies? Where does that application go? And a lot of times I've heard, we don't know. They get lost. And so from the franchisee standpoint, really, there's a part of that where it would be nice to put that back in their hands, let them take the applications and make the hires based upon the criteria of the company, but then be able to put together, here's every location broken out in the results that are happening. Here's now the franchisor platform that shows in real time what you're getting, and that's why we're here. We have it. It's just a matter of getting the opportunities to work with you guys.
Anyone else? If you could thank these gentlemen.
Thanks, guys.
Great.
Appreciate it.
You coming up for closing remarks? Turn it over to our guy.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for staying till the end. We really appreciate it. This has been a very successful conference, and we're super, super happy about being able to do this. With that, I think we're going to consider this adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for staying. Appreciate it.